I suppose probably one of the hardest stories in my career. It's not a job I went to or anything, but it's probably the hardest time of my career, and it had the biggest impact long term and everything. You know what I mean? You can go to a job, but it can affect you. It can be over in a day, a week. It might stick with you for years. But this particular incident obviously has stuck with me till this day because of what happened. So basically, my career started in Rockhampton. I left for a while, went overseas, went to Brisbane, came back in 2000, back into Rockhampton. So I had my daughter, my first child, Gabriella. She wasn't very old at all, actually pretty newly born. Just finding my way back into the Rockhampton way of life and ambulance, which I started when I was 18. And now I'm back in at 30 years of age, I think. I started in the ambulance with Craig Staines at 18, so we were very close. When I was overseas, he went on to become a CCP, critical care paramedic, etc. And a good family friend, Bill Birch, was a mentor of mine, and he was also a paramedic. They were working on the helicopter at the time. I think I was working that particular day. I went home. They went on a job that night, and I just went to sleep, as you do. I got a phone call. I think it was around like 2:00 in the morning. Basically just woke up. Yes, the ambulance, the helicopter's gone down. Craig and Bill are dead. That's basically the phone call I got from comms. You need to come into work. And I was probably just, gobsmacked, in shock. The wife woke up, and little girl's asleep in bed. But I suppose it's a smack in the face, because even though I'd worked in the ambulance up until that stage, from 18 to 30, I'd seen death. I went to trauma. I went to horrific things throughout my career, but never really expected to go to work and see two of my friends die at work or not come home. It's not as though I thought we were in the army or the police force or something. This was, and this had happened years before in the service, but very rarely. So I got that phone call and basically went into work and just found like a shell-shocked station. Every basically paramedic who worked there was told to come in. I don't think they had a plan back in those days, Lee.
Yeah.
Just rang around to inform so you didn't hear the news. And I suppose the thing, they don't want us to wake up and see that on the news. They want to tell us first, this has happened. Like later.
Facebook, like me.
Yeah. And if I wouldn't have watched the news, I would have just went to work or days off or whatever I was on. I wouldn't have been any wiser. And yeah.
Did I expect you to actually work that night?
No, not at all. And I suppose that, basically the story was the boys were actually, those two went on the job. Other friends of mine were actually flipping coins to see who goes on this job because, everyone wanted to get on the helicopter back in the day. And I worked on it years later, but they went on this job to a child who had croup, the mother, pretty standard type job, and arrive at Marlborough. And then when they leave, a massive fog comes in. And back in those days with the helicopter, because I used to work in them, there was no night vision. There was none of that, I suppose, technology. He just got lost in the fog and tried to land and came down, hit a fence, flipped in the back rotor and everything. It all just did its job. And I suppose and then the most horrific thing to that, because Craig was only pretty young, he's only a couple of years older than me. Bill was about to retire. And I used to think he was an old man. He was 55, which I am almost now. But, then other close friends had to go to that. Close friends of yours and mine, like Spike, and actually go and find their bodies and all that sort of stuff. And so it was massive news. 5 people died on a rescue helicopter. But when I went into work, it wasn't about us coming into work. There wasn't much work around in those days. Like these days, they'd need people to work. There was probably hardly any jobs on that day, but they just got everyone in, I think, just because they needed to get everyone in to tell them what happened.
Yeah.
We came in, I didn't know, what am I going to do? I thought I was coming into work, had my uniform on, and basically they just said, look, this has happened. We're going to separate into groups. And they had I think it was the infancy of priority 1.
Yeah. Okay.
So they had a psychologist who sort of there was no real psychologist back in those days, but set a plan and go, right, are you going to go off in groups and talk about how this made you feel? Like, I really wasn't prepared for it or wasn't impressed by it. It was too early, Lee. I remember being put into a group of people who probably didn't even know my friends very well, who were from HR and other parts of the service, and they all wanted to say how they felt and everything. And I just thought, I just need to get out of here. Go see my wife and child, or see the close mates like who are close mates with these two. But yeah, I think we were there for a bit of the day, and then I suppose that's when, I don't know if I said it or someone else said, but I remember some old guy, not old, we weren't old in those days, looking at each other going, we need to go to the pub. We need to go to the pub, have a few beers and like process what's happened. The guys were actually, close and all that sort of stuff. So, and that's what we sort of did that day. I had to, I rang my wife.
That day, I'm sure it was.
Well, I rang my wife, Ingrid, because Gabrielle was only a few months old, your nanny. And I just said, look, we'll go to the pub. What else am I going to do? I need to have some beers or whatever. And I think back to those days, like how it's different these days, what would happen if it happened tomorrow here, like, our boss back then, our officer in charge, was like a father to us, like Jeff Johnson. He would have come to the pub with us and everything too, once he'd done what he had to do for that day. But yeah, we went to the pub, and I don't think we just stayed there for one day, Lee. I think it went on for a few days. Probably, it's hard to remember back, but it probably went on for a week. And some of it was celebrating their life, and some of it was mourning their life. And then we had to get out of that, and because it came time to bury them and go to funerals, and which was, like you said, unheard of before. All these big things were planned, because Bill, who died, he was ex-army, ex-SAS. So, had a massive service in one of the churches in Rockhampton. And then Craig, Salvation Army, had a big service as well. And then we had a massive parade through the streets of Rockhampton, Fitzroy Street, with bagpipe players and ambulance in convoys, and Spike and I were in the back with a coffin in the ambulance, where you generally have a stretcher with a patient, don't you? So it was all pretty surreal when I think back now, but I think it was a pretty fitting sort of farewell, because both very good paramedics and like great men. Like one was probably just starting really off his career, and the other one's retiring. But yeah, I suppose all those days took a toll too. Like a lot, I think 2 funerals over a period of days, and like, a big march, and probably more pub.
Yeah.
Lose the weight,
Were you working?
Oh, that's a good question. Like you said, I didn't ask for time off, and no one did. We came in and they said, we don't want any of you to work for 2 weeks. And they just made a blanket decision. None of yous are working. And they brought in people from Mackay and other regions who just came in and did our shifts. They came and stayed in Rockhampton and worked for 2 weeks. Yeah. Which not a bad decision, I suppose. Like back then they wouldn't know what to do. And like, I think a lot of, in that 2 weeks, people still wanted to be together. Like the paramedics wanted to be together. Like I know I had a new baby and stuff, but I still wanted to go to the pub in the afternoon and do what I did. But I reckon I got off pretty easy, because throughout that next weeks into months, I think a lot of people probably not fell apart, but it didn't fracture the station, but it changed the station. Like something like that's always going to change it, eh? People decided to go their own way. I'm going to go here. I'm going to move. I can't work in Rockhampton anymore. I'd already planned to get married in Norway. So I was heading to Norway. So after 2 weeks and after the funerals and everything, we went to Norway, and I got, had bucks nights and got married and had a holiday. I still knew that it all happened, and probably was still recovering from it, but that probably helped me move on and sort of, the grieving process and stuff. Like I had things to look forward to. Like we're getting married, not really at a honeymoon, and there was one of my good paramedic mates who from Rocky was coming to it as well. And he wasn't there during the time, so it was good for him. So when I came back from that, I suppose I noticed everyone was back in the workforce but people had probably left. Some of them had gone to different stations, and it had changed. Like we were still really close and lots of stuff, like a brotherhood and everything. But I thought,
Did you learn any coping mechanisms or any like skills, breathe or anything back then, or is it just now? Would you say
it's probably not back then. Probably more now. Like back then, I know that the service and that probably didn't know how to deal with it, so they tried to do what they thought was right. Like that day one, I thought, wow, this is completely off the boil. I don't think this is right. Pulling people in, asking them how they feel and stuff. Some of us need to curl up in the ball. So I think it was good to look after people. Maybe say they don't need to work. Obviously, a lot of people. I think about then was about the time psychologists and that started being accessible because Priority 1 was just kicking off. I think a lot of people accessed that. Like I said, I think what I did, getting married, having a newborn, that all helped me. As far as coping mechanisms, I just thought, well, I never thought about giving up the ambulance job. I thought, well, this is what I do. This is what these boys did. They wouldn't want me to be like that. And, look, at the start, yes, definitely, I probably drank too much.
Yeah.
That's a mechanism, but
well, it is. Yeah.
I definitely binge drank,
Yeah.
But I was busy with a child too. And
well, the problem with alcohol is the coping mechanism. Like it actually works.
Yeah.
For the short term.
And especially if you're
they'll call it a meltdown. Yeah. Like it does work. It numbs you, it makes, well, I'm sure it's just like bonding with your mates over being.
I think that's it. It was
the camaraderie.
Yeah, 100%. I think because we were together, when we were together, camaraderie and drinking was different because it was like being like still partying with Stavesy and Craig and everything. But if you were sitting there drinking by yourself, I think that's a different story.
That's a different. 6 months later.
Yes. Yeah. So, as far as coping mechanisms, yeah, that was probably mine back then. And it was probably good that I know my wife was very supportive and like strong during that time because having a first child too.
Yeah.
What's the go here? He hasn't turned up for 4 days. He's playing golf, drinking. This is not how I envisaged moving to Australia with my Australian husband. But yeah, as the years went on, then I probably realised more, mate, like, because obviously the QAS, everyone, like society's got smarter how to deal with stuff, haven't they?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't just QAS, it's just society.
Yeah, it was society in general. And it was funny, I was having dinner with Ingrid tonight and my wife, and I said about coping mechanisms when this happened. And she says, oh yes, there was a coping mechanism. It was called the Oxford. And that was the pub we were going to. Oh, you're pretty funny for a Norwegian. Yeah, sure. Go on.
It's a good pub, wasn't it?
It's
still around.
Still around, mate. So yeah, like that's sort of the story. And then I suppose after that, every year on the same date for a lot of years, we played golf. We went to the Oxford pub. We celebrated their life. I think it was up until the 10-year anniversary. We did a big thing at one of the Salvation Army churches with Craig's family, things like that. So it's probably only petered off in the last few years because a lot of paramedics have retired and left and are older and stuff. But look, we still send text messages every year, the same date, even if we don't do anything. All that group of guys always, I think on Facebook this year, we didn't do anything, but still thinking of your brother. Still that sort of brotherhood, sort of close niche. Yeah. So probably the hardest, like I said, I didn't go to the job, but a couple of close mates did too, but hardest thing in my career.
Yeah.
Was definitely that.